Hey Refuge Church, I'm so excited to be with you guys for another week. This week we are taking a short break from the book of Exodus or Shemot because it is Easter or Resurrection Sunday or pagan holiday, whichever floats your boat. Although I'm sure that many of us have read things on the internet about the origins of this holiday not being entirely kosher, as it were, I still think that it's worth taking one day to think about the themes of resurrection and what we can learn from them, right? It's been part of the Christian holidays calendar for a couple thousand years, right? So we can take a moment. One thing is I would love to really take the time to dive into the doctrine of resurrection, what it means for justice, what it means for equality, all the things that we care about here. However, that would be a much longer survey, right? To go through the whole doctrine point by point. And we're not going to do that today. We're going to look at one particular element of the resurrection story and see if we can find some more meaning there and understand why it's there and think critically about it, right? That's what we're about here. So I'm going to pray and we will start combing through the text. Should be fun. Lord God, I thank you so much for this group of people and this opportunity to think about resurrection and what it means and what kind of story you're telling in your text. I ask that you would be with us, and that our eyes and ears and hearts would be open to hear and see and understand what it is that you would have us to learn today. I thank you that new life is a signature part of your narrative, and I ask that it would become a part of our identities as well, and something that we can cheerfully and confidently claim for ourselves. I ask all these things in the name of your Son, who rose indeed, Jesus. Amen. All right, so one little element from the day. Which one from the story do I want to really have us sit on this year anyway? When I was a youth, one of my first concerts that I went to was the Christian band, Third Day. I went to go see them with my family at the Puyallup Fair. It was great. I still have the live album from that time. And one of the songs that they perform is Creed, in which they sing the Apostles' Creed, which, oh boy, that's a whole thing to unpack there, right? But one thing that happens, of course, both in the concert and on the recording, is the band sings, "On the third day, he rose again." And the whole stadium goes absolutely bonkers, right? Yeah, and I know that that's because Third Day is the title of the band. I'm aware of that. And yet, it's kind of curious. The fact that he was dead, and then on the third day, he showed back up. He wasn't in his grave anymore, is something that we can all wildly cheer about and name bands after, is a little bit curious. So we want to take our critical thinking hats, and we want to figure out and understand and comprehend what is already in the text that we have made doctrine and kind of removed about something that we repeat over and over and say, yes, I believe that. We want to set it back into the text, find it in situ, as you might say in archaeology, and look at what the meaning is. Why wasn't it 5 days? Why wasn't it a week? Who really cares, right? So that's the mission that we're on to discover today. So we're going to start all the way back in Genesis, and I'm going to take you through story by story the different places that third day shows up, not the band, the phrase. And if these stories are familiar to you, maybe this will unlock another way of looking at it. And if they're not familiar to you, what fun finding out new stories that are in the Bible. Super fascinating. Encourage everybody to go back and relook at them if it's been a while, or if you haven't explored them for a long time, perhaps. All right, so we are going to start in Genesis 22. The Lord has showed up to the character of Avraham. Avraham has this long-awaited son. He's awaited for all of this time, trying to get pregnant with his wife, Sarai, and they finally had a son. His name is Yitzhak. And God shows up, and Avraham understands, whether that's the intention or not. I would argue on the translation it's dubious, but Avraham understands that it is his duty to go and sacrifice, i.e. slaughter his son. And so early in the morning he packs up his bags and he's thinking about it the whole way. He's talking with his son about what's going to happen while not really telling him what he's planning on. And it says that on the third day, he sees the mountain where it's going to go down on the horizon. And so there's this suspense building, right? It's very cinematic that's building up. He puts the wood on his son's back. The mountain has appeared. What is he going to choose to do on the third day? He chooses to try to kill his son, and he has to be stopped by an angel, and a ram, ding, 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 a ram, we've been talking about that in the Exodus series, shows up in a bush to save Yitzhak's life. Yitzhak is totally traumatized, obviously. He takes off, doesn't show up for years again back in the family region. And so where it's the third day, it's at this critical point, this cinematic moment, what's going to happen. It's our first picture. It's our first story. Next one, Genesis 31. Yaakov is this very scrappy character. He's Abraham's grandson, and he is in a back and forth kind of series of cons with his father-in-law. That's not an exaggeration, it's this crazy story. His father-in-law's name is Lavan, and they keep trying to trick each other out of each other's purposes, right? And so finally it's all culminated and Yaakov says, enough, I'm going to abscond with a bunch of his stuff. His two daughters that he's married, doesn't let them say goodbye or anything, and he doesn't know it, but his wife also steals Lavan's gods. So Lavan is out in the wilderness taking care of his sheep, and it says that after 3 days, on the third day, he finds out that they've gone. He packs up everything in a fury, goes after Yaakov, and God has to show up and say, hey, don't do anything to Yaakov. He shows up in a dream to Lavan. Lavan is able to cool his heels a little bit, and they're able to work something out. But it's on the third day. Again, we have the suspense. What's going to happen? What's Lavan going to do? Is he going to say, oh boy, yeah, I get it. This has been rough here. Blessings on him as he goes on his way. Nope. Third day, he says, absolutely not. I'm going to go get all my stuff. Takes off, goes and gets it. So it's not a particularly happy endings, right, on these stories so far. Here's another one. Genesis 34. Yaakov has a lot of sons and a daughter named Dinah, and Dinah is the victim of an assault, a sexual assault, and the man, who is a prince of the nearby city-state, wants to marry her. Dinah's father says, and his sons, Dinah's brothers, are outraged. They feel like their father isn't paying enough attention to this situation. And so they go to the king of the neighboring city-state, Shechem, and they say, hey, it's so good that you want to marry Dinah, or you want your son to marry Dinah. That's great, but you know what? To be part of our family, you got to be circumcised. It's just a thing. And the king of Shechem says, great, awesome, I'm all in. 3 days after the circumcision, third day, we have this moment of suspense, right? Are Shimon and Levi going to hold up their word? Are they going to say, yep, you did what we asked, all's forgiven? Dubious that may be, or not. And again, on the third day, it is not the case. They break their word, they come in with swords, and they murder absolutely everyone in town. Ooh, another rough motif count for third day again. Genesis 40, Yosef, so Yaakov's son, is now found himself in an Egyptian prison cell, and he's talking to his cellmates, and they've both had dreams. He says, dreams belong to God. I'll interpret those for you, no problem. And he does, and he tells one of his cellmates that in 3 days he's going to get restored up to the palace. And by the way, please speak on my behalf when you're up there. Really appreciate it. That's what Yosef says. And he tells the other, the baker, I believe, that in 3 days he is going to die. On the third day, both of those things happen. One guy gets restored and the other guy gets murdered by Pero. Does it work out for Yosef? Does he get out of prison on the third day because he talked to the cupbearer about this and now he's seen that this guy really is with God, because he was able to successfully interpret these dreams? Nope. Third day, the guy restored totally forgets about Yosef, moves on with his life. It takes ages more for him to remember that he is still languishing in prison, right? Third day, all this suspense, what's going to happen? Ooh, every time, right? Judges 20. I wrote a paper about Judges chapter 19. So if you have a lot of questions about this story, feel free to talk to me about it. It's pretty crazy and a bit triggering if you are if you're aware of those content warnings. Okay, so in Judges chapter 20, a woman in the previous chapter has been brutally murdered, gruesomely dismembered, and the rest of Israel says that the member of the tribe who did that, he was in Gibeah, which is a city in Benjamin, the tribe lands of Benjamin. They say, absolutely not. This is disgusting and horrible. You need to turn this man over. And the tribe of Benjamin closes ranks and says, you won't get one of our own. Even if he did something wrong, he's one of us. You can't hold him to justice. Not at all a relevant story for our times, right? So what happens? Yisrael says, sorry, that's not okay. And if you're going to align yourself with him, well, we're going to fight you about it then. And Benjamin says, fine. And so all of Yisrael, all of the tribes go and fight all of the one tribe of Benjamin. They go at it, and at the first day and the second day, it's going back and forth. It's not quite clear how it's going to go, who's going to come out on top. And on the third day, the Lord, who has just been advising up until now, actually appears and shows up on scene. The third day, what's going to happen, right? Or is he going to help them find some peace and negotiate things out and just get them to hand over the guy who did this? Nope, the Lord shows up and takes out 25,000 Benjaminites, almost as if God has no patience for people who align themselves with oppressors and do not let them face justice. Just a thought. So third day, what's going to happen? God shows up, decimates a tribe, right? Our motif is holding strong. Our theory is coming together. 1 Samuel 20. Jonathan and David have a friendship in which they like to meet in the middle of the night in a field and whisper sweet nothings to one another and sometimes kiss. And for some reason, Jonathan's dad isn't really chill with this. And David believes that Jonathan's dad, King Shaul, is out to kill him. And so they're not sure. Jonathan says, that can't be. My dad wouldn't do that, right? And so they divine a ruse. And the ruse is that David won't show up to the family dinner. And we'll see how Shaul reacts, if he's mad or not. David keeps himself safe, hides in the field, waits to find out. So the suspense is building. King Shaul doesn't say anything about the fact that David is dissing him on the first day and the second day, but the third day rolls around and he says, what is going on, to his son Jonathan. Jonathan lies, says that David has just gone back to be with his family in Bethlehem for the holiday. And Shaul says, absolutely not, sees right through the lie and starts chucking spears at his son, Jonathan, saying that he is perverse and a shame to himself and the whole family. And so Jonathan has to sneak out, back to the field, tell David, we can't be together. My dad doesn't approve of us. David has to run off. So third day, all this suspense. What's Shaul going to do? Is he really set against David? Third day comes, the penny does drop, and Shaul really is out to get David. Rough story. 1 Samuel 30. David, again, still his story is booted off of his current military leadership team. He has got this whole situation figured out with the Philistine and with King Achish, and he's happy in command of a bunch of men. And then the arrangement falls apart and he's super bummed out. He's been kind of fired because of his reputation that he has with King Shaul. He's been lumped in with him, and so he is despondent and is made to walk back to whence he came. And on the third day of doing that, he comes upon the village where he left his wives. Not a suggested strategy, but maybe that's just me. He comes back upon the village and it has been burned down, and all the women and children have been taken into captivity. He has to go get his wives, right? So third day already, what's going to happen? I can't believe this. And then he comes upon this village that's gone. So the last little story that we'll look at before we talk about the potential subversion that's going on is in 1 Kings 12. Solomon, or Shlomo, has a son named Rechavam. Rechavam succeeds Shlomo when he dies. And Shlomo, for all of our happy Bible stories, was actually a quite oppressive king, right? He had all these building projects and he brought in workers who were not treated well. And so when Rechavam becomes king, the people come to Rechavam and they say, hey, your dad worked us so hard. Could you please let us unionize? Would you please let us perhaps have this burden taken off of us, that we might have some freedom and justice, right? Rechavam says, that's a very interesting idea. Let me talk to my advisors about it. So he goes and talks to his advisors and they say, you know what? I think that, well, they say, we were whipped by your father. You should say, well, get ready to be flogged. And great comeback, right? Ooh, really, really clever. So Rechavam says, I'll think about it. On the third day, he comes out to the people. Oh boy, right? Judgment Day is here. What's going to happen? What's the pronouncement? He goes with his advisors and says, sucks to be you guys. You thought it stung before. Get ready to get run over by scorpions. This is going to just get way worse than it was before. Dark story. You can go check it out. So into this cacophony of a motif, right? All of these stories are saying around the same thing. You're waiting and you're not sure, and there's all this suspense. The third day rolls around and something terrible happens. Despair happens. 25,000 Benyaminites die. That's a bad day. Your dad wants to kill your friend after all. That's a bad day. And so into these continual over and over pattern of a motif that's been laid out for us speaks the prophet Hosea. He says in chapter 6, beautiful reimagining of what could happen. He's speaking to the Israelites when they're in deep trouble, right? And he's looking for God's hand in all of that, and he can ascertain that it is because of their relationship with God that they're in the spot that we're in now. And he reimagines a better potential future. In verse 1-3, I'll read because it's beautiful. He says, come, let us return to the Lord. Because he has torn, he will heal us. He has struck us down and will bind us up. He will revive us after 2 days. And on the third day, he will raise us up that we might live in his presence. Let us press on to know the Lord. His rising is sure like the dawn. He will come like the showers to us, like the spring rains that water the earth. And so this beautiful, captivating piece of poetry stays with God's people through exile, through them returning to the land, through them being reoppressed by the Seleucids and the Romans, and is held so precious and kept. And it's this verse that likely a man named Yeshua, or in the north, Yeshu, memorized, of course, and predicted for his own life. And so in the Gospels, we hear over and over Jesus reference these verses that he will be struck down, but on the third day he will rise. And it's amazing in flying in the face of this repeated condemnation on the third day, darkness on the third day, murder on the third day, injustice on the third day, homophobia on the third day, in my opinion, greater suffering, wage slavery on the third day. It's been over and over and over and over. And into that space, into that darkness, as imagined, the holy imagination of Hosea, Jesus steps and subverts the narrative. But it's not quite a subversion, dun dun dun, plot twist, because the first mention of third day, of course, goes back to, if you think about it, of course, Genesis chapter 1. So on the first day, light and darkness is made, right? On the second day, there's this expanse and the waters are separated, etc. And on the third day, it says, then God said, let the earth produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and fruit trees on the earth, bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And it was so. The earth produced vegetation, seed-bearing plants according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. Evening came, and then morning, the third day. So the real primal, the first image that we get for third day is into this expanse, this barren land, right, that's been created beneath water and water. On the third day is the day that new life finally sprouts from the ground. And it's not just new life, it's new life that carries the potential for more new life, right? It puts it in there over and over. Life is dynamic and continuing and evolving. And so it's not just plants, it's plants with seeds. It's not just trees, it's trees with fruit and fruit that has seeds in it, etc. And so Jesus shows up on the third day with his new life and a new way of understanding our identity as Christians, right? Mirroring the new life showing up on the scrap of dirt in the middle of water in the creation story. And so, even if all of the articles are right, which I think they are, about the real origins of Easter and fertility and Ishtar and all of the other things that are stated and then debunked and then stated again, but slightly differently. Those stories are still about fertility and spring, right? And new life showing up. So why don't we lean into that and say, yes, it just so happens that at the spring equinox, right, is when we get to think about how new life returns, and new life surprises us in the midst of torrential rain and still snow in some parts of the world. We can trust that resurrection is still on the horizon with the prophet Hosea and Jesus, right? And Paul plays into this as well when he starts really picking apart what the doctrine of resurrection means. He talks about what it means to be a new person in Messiah and the Anointed One. He talks about the power that we have through the Spirit, through the breath of resurrection. So it has all of these outward workings, but those images still go back further into the Bible too, right? In Hosea, which we already looked at in chapter 2, God's people are described, and it says that when we enter the valley of trouble, it becomes for us a gateway of hope. That's because we're people of resurrection, right? It's not the end story. Trouble is not the end for us. Psalm 84 says, happy are they who are on the pilgrimage. Everywhere, not everywhere, but a lot of places where it says blessed scratched out, it means happy. There's a word for blessed, it's barach, it's not ashrei, which is happy. Anyway, pet peeve, happy. I don't know why we can't be happy and religious at the same time. Happy are those who are on the pilgrimage. That's us. We're on this path, right? We're on a spiritual journey with our community of figuring out who we are, who God is, what our role is in this world. Happy are they who are on the pilgrimage, because Psalm 84, they will enter the valley of tears, right? That's why this is not the prosperity gospel. We're not exempt from the valley of trouble. We're not exempt from the valley of tears. But it says that for them, those on the pilgrimage, they will become the well springs that are life-giving and life-sustaining for the pilgrimage, right? So we come through the valley of tears, and we, because of the power of resurrection, the power of new life, which is always accessible to us through this story that we believe in, that when it seems like everything is dark, there is still light. When it seems as if the story is over, we can still persevere. That becomes the strength for us to go on. And it says that we move from strength to strength, from joy to joy, as we are on this journey together. So we can take this imagining with us, these images, if we turn, before we close together, to the story in Matthew 28, right? Jesus has been crucified. Yeshua has been put in a tomb, and a seal has been set on the stone, and there's a guard, 2 guards at least, put in front of it in this version of the story that we have in Matthew. It says, after Shabbat, as the first day of the week was dawning. So this is Sunday morning. One thing that we get right in traditional Christianity. First day of the week was dawning. Mary the Magdalene, I will argue, and the other Mary went to view the tomb. And there was a violent earthquake, because an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and approached the tomb. He rolled back the stone and was sitting on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing was white as snow. I'm guessing that means how he showed up, not as in how he looked was like lightning, but maybe he looked like the Flash, who knows? It says the guards were so shaken by fear of him that they became like dead men. So they just passed out. I've never seen an Easter story play, but it sounds like an entertaining part of it. The angel told the women, do not be afraid, because I know you're looking for Yeshua who was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. And so they look, and he's not there, and they take off running to go tell the disciples. And as they're running, Jesus shows up to them, as he does sometimes when we are pursuing the good news, right? He just poof shows up, and they get to speak to them. And what does he say, by the way? But greetings, which I just think is great. And then he says, do not be afraid, which is this other whole biblical motif. And they go and tell everyone about what has happened on the third day. These women, these first evangelists, get to be the ones to tell the story of what has happened, how this curse, the seeming curse, right? What happens over and over and over and over, death and destruction, has been turned on its head, and instead we find new life, persevering over darkness, justice, persevering over injustice. So I hope that this Resurrection Sunday, Pesach, Passover, Easter, pagan day that you ignore except for eating peeps, whatever. However you are working with this holiday, maybe sad, missing family meals. Maybe you've never paid attention to the day at all, but whatever place you're in, I hope that our eyes are open to see the new life that's sprouting all around us, to see the places where the light is creeping in. And sometimes our heads get so stuck on the ground, right? The Marys are running and they basically run into Jesus on the way, right? Not really a condemnation on them. That's a metaphor. I'll fight you if you have something bad to say about Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. But anyway, let our eyes be open, not so quick to fight people. Admonition to myself. And to see the new life that's showing up all around us, to see the spring, whether it's a spiritual spring, if you've been in a place of darkness about Christianity and faith and the church and all of that, I hope that you can start to see new little seedlings coming up for air, and new ways of being, starting new peace, new joy, new big ideas. And sometimes that's scary, because what if someone squashes it? But let's have a little bit of faith in the process, and trust that this new life isn't going to be squelched out. Jesus wasn't immediately re-murdered by the Romans, right? So let's lean into that and open our eyes and enjoy the spring and enjoy all the things that God is doing in our own lives. And so I am going to pray. God, we are so quick to be staring at our own feet, to be believing the message that we are not good enough, and because we're not good enough, things aren't going to work out well for us because that's what we deserve, or all sorts of other terrible narratives, Lord. And you show up and you show that no matter how many times it has been condemnation before, when you show up, it is new life. No matter how many times it's been devastation, it's been things that are unbearable weight. We are people who are about new life, who are able to find the gateways of hope in the valleys of trouble. And so I ask that you would make us a people who know how to persevere, who know how to be forbearant, who know that you are stronger than our hearts and our frailty and tendency to turn back to the same old narratives. And I thank you that you have the ability to, and the will to create shalom, to put the world back together, and that you are doing so whether we have the eyes to see or not. But I ask that we would be able to share in that joy and be able to see all the goodness that's popping up all around us, and the ways that you subvert expectations and subvert the narrative. I thank you for all of these things in the name of your Son, who is risen indeed. Amen. All right, if this is a life-giving space for you, please consider, pray about, Rebel Give. The link is in the description. We really need help getting this little thing off the ground. So if this community is one that you feel a part of and has blessed you, we would really love your support. If you're looking for a PDF with this week, I think it's scripture references in it and the discussion questions that we're going to go over, you can also find that. And then finally, we'd love to meet you. We'd love to have you join us 7:30 p.m. on Sundays, West Coast time, on Zoom. And so if you look, there's a link to our website, and there's a form on the website that you can fill out that just sends an email to us. Let us know that you want to meet us and hang out and listen and contribute. We'd love to hear your voice. All right. Have a wonderful Easter or whatever day, and I'll see you next week. Bye.